Hey guys, today I'll show you a science fiction thriller TV series named Invasion, Season 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins in the deserts of the Arab region. An elderly shepherd, tending his camels, spots a strange figure charging through the sands. As it draws closer, the camels sense danger and scatter in all directions. But the old man stands frozen, watching as the mysterious being approaches. Only when it's nearly upon him does he see its true form. It's a triangular, otherworldly object. A sudden blast of sound erupts from the creature, launching the old man through the air with tremendous force. Meanwhile, in a small town in upstate New York, a sheriff is preparing for retirement when he's called in for one final case, a missing persons report. 2 local residents had stolen a car from a nearby farm, but according to the farmer, they vanished without a trace. Thinking it's just another petty crime, the sheriff isn't overly concerned. That is, until he spots something unusual out in the cornfield. Climbing the farm's lookout tower, the sheriff discovers a massive crater in the middle of the field, with crows circling ominously overhead. He and a female deputy drive out to investigate and find the stolen car wrecked and abandoned nearby. They assume the 2 residents crashed the car and fled the scene. But before they can inspect further, a swarm of crows suddenly descends on them. They narrowly escape by leaping out of the vehicle just in time. Determined to get answers, the sheriff interviews the 2 missing residents' shady group of friends and then questions a man's girlfriend, but no one seems to know where the 2 men went. Growing increasingly agitated, the sheriff confides in the deputy. She asks why this case is bothering him so much, and the sheriff finally reveals a haunting memory. It turns out that decades ago, he worked on a missing person case involving a young girl. Though he found her, she died 2 days later in a tragic accident. That failure has haunted him ever since, and today's bizarre events make him feel like this might be his chance at redemption. That evening, the town throws a retirement party for the sheriff, but he's distant and moody, and after giving a short speech, he quietly slips away. He returns to the crater site, hoping to find some clue about the missing men. Suddenly, the sand beneath his feet begins to shift. Thinking the men might be buried underneath, the sheriff starts digging, only to awaken something monstrous. A black tentacle shoots out of the ground and, like a GPS gadget, traces him and strikes him down in an instant. As the camera pans upward, a large, translucent UFO hovers silently above the scene. Meanwhile, over in Long Island, New York, Anisha is starting a seemingly ordinary day with her husband Manny and their 2 children. Everything appears normal until disaster strikes. As the kids head off to school, a strange phenomenon sweeps through the classrooms. Every child suddenly begins to suffer from spontaneous nosebleeds. Every child, except Anisha's son, Luke. Alarmed, Anisha rushes to the school where chaos reigns. Dozens of kids are bleeding and no one knows why. When she finds her children, staff tell her Luke is the only one unaffected. Fearing for their safety, Anisha grabs the kids and rushes them to the hospital. At the hospital, doctors examine her daughter and find all her vital signs completely normal. They dismiss the incident as a simple case of nosebleeds. Anisha calls her husband to update him, but gets no response. When she returns home, she checks Manny's location using a tracking app on her tablet and is shocked to discover he isn't at work. Suspicious, Anisha takes the kids and follows the signal, only to catch Manny in the act, having an affair with another woman. Back home, seething with betrayal, she digs into the woman's background and finds out she's not only beautiful, but also a successful food blogger. The comparison makes Anisha feel small, and the bitterness grows. That evening, when Manny returns, Anisha has cooked a lavish meal using one of the woman's online recipes. Whether Manny is hungry or not, she insists he eats it. Manny realizes Anisha knows everything. The confrontation escalates quickly, and the tension between them is about to explode, when suddenly, the ground starts to shake violently. There's no time to argue. Anisha and Manny rush to their children and try to save them, unaware that this is just the beginning of the alien nightmare that's about to unfold. In Tokyo, Japan, astronaut Hinata was about to embark on a year-long mission to the International Space Station. Her girlfriend, Yamato, worked at the Aerospace Center as a researcher, but their relationship was known only to the 2 of them. As the launch approached, Yamato used the excuse of checking the equipment to enter the spacecraft and privately say goodbye to Hinata. Once the countdown began, all the scientists watched nervously as the rocket slowly lifted off. With the final countdown echoing in the control room, the rocket successfully soared into space and docked with the International Space Station. Just when everyone thought the mission was progressing smoothly, disaster struck. Without warning, Hinata's spacecraft began to shake violently. Before she could react, a massive rupture tore open the cabin. A gaping hole appeared, and a powerful force sucked everyone out into the vacuum of space. Meanwhile, in the small town where Anisha and her family lived, the earthquake that had rocked the area abruptly stopped. As they looked out the window, they were stunned by the devastation outside. Manny told Anisha to take the kids into the basement while he went out to assess the situation. Some believed it was an explosion, others blamed a tornado. Before long, people began to notice that Anisha's house had miraculously remained intact, sparking rumors that her family had something to do with it. As suspicion grew, a sudden shout from Luke came from inside the house. Anisha and Manny rushed in to find Luke muttering frantically, begging some unknown voice to stop. It turned out that a voice named Wajo was echoing in Luke's mind. Just as he returned to normal, the windows in the house suddenly shattered for no apparent reason, terrifying the family. They immediately tried to flee, but the car wouldn't start. There was no signal, and the system required an internet connection. Manny, in a moment of desperation, noticed the neighbors preparing to leave and ran to ask for help. But their car was already full. Shockingly, Manny told them to just take him and leave the rest. The neighbors ignored him and drove off. Anisha overheard everything. Though crushed by his selfishness, she still didn't abandon him. She climbed back into the car and tried again and again until the engine finally roared to life. The family could finally escape their nightmare of a town. Elsewhere in the UK, a boy named Casper was born with epilepsy and often bullied at school. His classmate Monty, from a wealthy family and always surrounded by a gang of friends, was his main tormentor. That morning, as soon as Casper arrived at school, Monty deliberately bumped into him, sending his epilepsy meds scattering across the floor. As Casper tried to pick them up, Monty mocked him relentlessly until the teacher stepped in just in time to stop the bullying. Casper retreated to the bathroom to take his pills, and once he felt better, boarded the school bus. It was a field trip day. On the way to their destination, the bus suddenly braked hard, causing Casper's sketchbook to fall out. A classmate named Jamila picked it up and was intrigued by what she saw. The two quickly hit it off and became friends. But halfway through the trip, all the students' phones suddenly lost signal. Things took a darker turn when Casper had a seizure. As his body convulsed, something terrifying unfolded outside the window. A barrage of meteors came crashing down from the sky, shaking the earth violently. The teacher, distracted by concern for Casper, couldn't react in time. The bus plunged off a cliff, taking everyone inside with it. Back in Tokyo, Yamato missed Hinata terribly after her departure. She recorded numerous videos, planning to show them to Hinata when she returned, but the awaited reunion never came. Instead, Yamato received an urgent call from the Aerospace Center. Rushing there, she learned that Hinata's spacecraft had lost contact hours ago, and several other nations' ships had also gone silent. Everyone assumed a cosmic storm was to blame. Desperate, Yamato checked the transmission logs and discovered that Hinata's team had sent out a distress signal shortly before vanishing. When emergency communication was re-established, Yamato pulled up the last footage transmitted from the spacecraft and saw the horrifying image of a gaping hole in the cabin. With survival deemed impossible, everyone believed the crew had perished. Grief-stricken, Yamato pushed her mother away when she tried to offer comfort. To numb her pain, she went to a bar and drowned herself in alcohol. In her daze, she thought she saw Hinata's silhouette and brought a stranger home, mistaking the girl for Hinata. When she finally came to her senses, she sent the girl's heavy body away and sank back into her sorrow, alone. At a military base somewhere in the Arabian desert, Captain Trevathan was leading an anti-terrorist unit in a chaotic region, fighting to maintain peace. Though he appeared composed and professional around his comrades, deep down he was burdened with sorrow. The mission had strained his marriage, and the distance from his wife in New York weighed heavily on him. Still, duty came first. The next day, Trevathan's team received an assignment. A squad had gone silent in a nearby village. Fully equipped, they entered the village to investigate, only to find the residents hiding indoors. When the villagers saw soldiers arriving, they became agitated and tried to communicate, but the language barrier made it nearly impossible. Trevathan suspected an enemy ambush. An elderly woman pointed them toward a local school. There, Trevathan spotted a young boy with a nosebleed, drawing circles on a desk. Trevathan asked if the boy had seen any soldiers wearing uniforms like theirs, but the boy didn't answer. Instead, he pointed silently into the distance. Following the direction, Trevathan saw thick black smoke rising. The team approached and found a radio transceiver on the ground. Just as they began to suspect an enemy ambush, a sudden sandstorm swept in with terrifying force. The unit suffered heavy casualties. When the storm finally cleared, Trevathan was the only survivor. Everyone else had vanished. He staggered back to a vehicle, trying to contact the base, but found all communication cut off. His shoulder had also been injured during the skirmish. Without treatment, it could prove fatal. With the vehicle destroyed, Trevathan had no choice but to trek through the desert on foot. Dehydrated and wounded, he collapsed midway through the journey. In a hazy, dreamlike state, he thought he saw his wife approaching. But when he came to, it was actually a local Arab man standing over him. Trevathan instinctively reached for his weapon, but the man showed no aggression and instead tossed him a water flask. After drinking, Trevathan regained some strength. Although they couldn't understand each other's words, Trevathan tried to communicate, asking about his missing team. The man broke a stick into 7 pieces on the ground. Trevathan assumed this meant the man had seen his 7 squad mates and tried to get him to lead the way. But before they could set off, Trevathan passed out again. When he awoke, the Arab man was tending to his wounds. The gesture softened the tension between them. Despite the language gap, Trevathan opened up about his regrets, his fears, and his love for his wife. For the first time in days, he felt less alone. Back in New York, chaos had taken hold. Anisha was driving through the city where traffic jams, police sirens, and fire trucks were everywhere. Realizing the city was spiraling out of control, she decided they had to get out. As they crossed a bridge, they witnessed a terrifying scene. Total blackout. The entire city had lost power. Realizing the crisis was escalating, they drove through the night until they reached a rest stop. Anisha parked the car to recharge and pick up supplies. She went into the store with her kids while asking her husband Manny to handle the charging. Inside, they saw news reports showing widespread unrest across the country. Some stations even claimed war had broken out. Suddenly, Anisha saw Manny arguing with another man in the parking lot. Since their car wouldn't charge, he impulsively grabbed another vehicle's keys, shouted for Manny to join him, and drove off in a stranger's car. They drove for hours before stopping at a motel. But even now, Manny couldn't let go of his affair. While Anisha and the kids were asleep like snoring pigs, he secretly called his lover from the front desk. After a long conversation, he finally returned to the room. As for Casper and the students who had fallen off the cliff, they were mostly unharmed, except for the teacher who was pinned beneath the vehicle and critically injured. Casper tried desperately to rescue him, but Monty kicked him aside and blamed Casper for everything, claiming his bad luck had cursed them all. He manipulated the other students into believing it too. Some students wanted to climb the mountain to seek help, but Monty firmly took charge, insisting that their only chance of survival was to stay put and wait for rescue. Everyone was afraid of Monty, so they had no choice but to follow his lead. But Casper couldn't wait any longer. He realized his epilepsy medication was running dangerously low. If this went on, he might not survive. Desperate, he tried to start a signal fire to attract rescuers. That's when Monty found him. Monty pretended to apologize, telling Casper a heartbreaking story about his own troubled family life. Moved by the story, Casper let his guard down and shared his secret with Monty. But to Casper's shock, Monty burst out laughing. It had all been a lie just to humiliate him. That night, Monty took control of the group's remaining food and insisted on collecting it for centralized management. When some students resisted, Monty called for a vote and used Casper's secret to blackmail him into supporting him. With Casper's forced endorsement, Monty gained majority support and was effectively crowned leader, now in control of all food supplies. While the others slept, Monty snuck away and secretly extinguished the fire Casper had lit to signal for help. Meanwhile, in Japan, Yamato was convinced the spaceship accident wasn't just some fluke. After pulling herself together, she returned to the space agency determined to find the truth. But the incident had already been covered up by the government. Only the official investigation team was allowed access to the details. Undeterred, Yamato confronted the director and demanded entry into the communications room. When he refused, she took advantage of a brief distraction to snatch his access card and sprinted down the hallway. A coworker who secretly admired her followed her smelly butt close behind. Once inside, Yamato quickly changed the room's password, locking out the others. As the director and his team scrambled to rewire the entry system, Yamato found what she was looking for, the final footage sent before the disaster. The video showed the spacecraft crashing into an unidentified flying object. Even stranger, an eerie voice kept repeating the word Wajo. It was now clear, the incident wasn't an accident. It was caused by extraterrestrial interference. Back with the students, Casper and Jamila awoke the next morning to a grim discovery. Their teacher had stopped breathing. They broke the news to the others, sending a fresh wave of panic through the group. No one wanted to end up like the teacher. Some students suggested climbing up the cliff to look for help, but Monty, as always, insisted on staying put. Casper had had enough. He stood up and demanded that the previous vote be overturned. Enraged, Monty revealed Casper's secret to everyone, but this time Casper didn't care. He ignored Monty's insults and began climbing toward the summit. Seeing this, the others followed his lead. Fortunately, they reached the top safely and discovered satellite debris scattered across the ground. It turned out they hadn't been hit by meteors, but by a falling cluster of Russian satellites. Then Casper noticed something shocking. The letters on one of the satellites matched a design in his sketchbook exactly. Though strange, he didn't dwell on it and suggested they start heading back. But once again, Monty tried to stir things up, insisting they stay and wait for help. This time, Casper stood his ground. He opened up about his painful childhood, how his older brothers used to bully him relentlessly, and told Monty that compared to them, he was nothing. With Casper finally speaking out, the others rallied around him. Casper offered anyone who wanted to leave a chance to come with him. One by one, every student joined him. Even Monty, left with no choice, begrudgingly followed. Meanwhile, after a night of rest, Anisha and her family were preparing to move on. Luke and his sister were hiding out in the restroom, whispering about whether their parents might be getting divorced. That's when the sister discovered a black stone tucked away in Luke's backpack. He snatched it back protectively, claiming it was his treasured collection. This mysterious stone would later prove to be incredibly important. As the family packed up and stepped outside the motel, they noticed a military unit organizing a civilian evacuation. While Anisha's husband spoke with the soldiers, she secretly checked his phone and found out why he'd been crying earlier. Turns out, his lover had dumped him. Worse yet, Anisha discovered that the woman was pregnant with his child. Devastated, Anisha locked herself in the car, thinking she would leave him behind. But in the end, her heart softened and she let him back in. The family continued heading north, but halfway through the trip, Luke suddenly insisted he needed to use the bathroom. Manny had no choice but to pull over and wait. But after a long time, Luke still hadn't returned. Worried, they ventured into the woods to search for him. As night fell, they unexpectedly came across a secluded cabin. Upon investigation, they discovered it was home to an older couple, and Luke was already inside. The man explained that the government had recently enacted a strict curfew, and fearing the family might be in danger, he had kindly invited them to stay the night. But what none of them knew was that danger was already closing in. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, Trevathan was led by the local Arab man to a remote mountaintop. It turned out the man had misunderstood his request. He hadn't brought him to find his lost teammates, but instead to a herd of goats. Trevathan was frustrated, but just then, his GPS tracker suddenly picked up a signal. His mood shifted immediately. After parting ways with the man, Trevathan followed the signal into a seemingly deserted town. It led him to a hospital. Though a few people were still inside, none dared approach him after seeing his weapon. After a tense search, he finally found one of his injured teammates, but he was the only one there. The rest were still missing. Just then, enemy forces stormed the hospital. Luckily, Trevathan's combat skills were formidable. Using the layout of the building to his advantage, he managed to eliminate the attackers and carry his wounded comrade out. He commandeered a vehicle and prepared to escape, but tragically, his teammate had already stopped breathing. There was no time to mourn. He had to keep moving. Back in Japan, Yamato was taken into custody. While being questioned, she revealed her suspicions to the director, but he insisted that what she saw was nothing more than ordinary space debris. Hoping for support, she turned to her coworker, but to her disappointment, he sided with the director for the sake of safety. The director didn't punish her further, but firmly warned her to stay out of the investigation and let her go. Yamato was furious, but powerless to do anything. The next day, she visited Hinata's childhood home and met her father. He was heartbroken over his daughter's death. Although Yamato claimed she was just a colleague, the father quickly saw through the lie and admitted he had long suspected the nature of their relationship. He told Yamato he had no issue with his daughter loving another woman. This deeply changed Yamato's view of him. She shared with him everything she had discovered in the communications room, including the strange audio recording from space. As a former radio engineer at the space agency, Hinata's father immediately picked up on something odd. When he amplified the sound, he noticed the soil in a nearby potted plant began to vibrate. He turned to Yamato and asked if the space agency had a larger speaker system. He wanted to test the signal on a bigger scale. Determined to uncover the truth, Yamato risked sneaking back into the space agency. She met the director again and asked to speak with him privately. Seeing her resolve, the director agreed. Yamato explained that sound cannot travel in a vacuum, yet the voice saying "Wajo" had been clearly recorded in space. That could only mean one thing. The interior of the spacecraft might not have been in a vacuum, suggesting the crew could still be alive. To persuade the director, she finally admitted the truth about her relationship with Hinata and asked him what he would do if it were his own wife in danger. That struck a nerve. Moved, the director showed her another recording. This one had come from deep space, and the fact that the sound existed at all strongly suggested alien involvement. Just then, the director received a call. Japan's partnership with the US meant that America would soon be taking over the investigation. Once that happened, Yamato would be completely cut off from any further access. Although he couldn't help her officially, the director told her, if someone happened to steal his access pass and sneak into the lab, there's nothing he could do about that. With that, he handed her his keycard and told her to do whatever it takes to find the truth. Meanwhile, after spending the night at the cabin, Anisha's husband suggested that someone go out and look for supplies since they were running low. But given how chaotic things were outside, it would be dangerous. Manny, out of fear, chose to stay behind, while Anisha, thinking of the children, volunteered to go herself. After saying goodbye to her kids, she headed into town only to run into a group of soldiers. Concerned about Anisha's condition, the soldiers insisted she undergo a medical check. To avoid unnecessary trouble, Anisha lied and said she was a doctor. Surprisingly, instead of questioning her, the soldiers immediately escorted her onto a military truck, explaining they were in desperate need of medical personnel. With no better option for her own safety, Anisha reluctantly agreed. That's when she met Dr. David on board. Soon after, the group arrived at a makeshift medical base. Although Anisha had graduated from medical school, she lacked real-world clinical experience. She wandered around the base looking completely lost, until David spotted her and asked for help suturing a wounded soldier. Anisha hesitated, unsure of what to do. Then she noticed something strange in the patient's wound, a small black object. Carefully extracting it, she discovered it was a black worm-like parasite. David was impressed. If not for Anisha's sharp eye, the parasite might have remained inside the patient and endangered his life. After the procedure, Anisha thought she'd finally be able to go home, but a soldier informed her they were relocating to a highway where many injured people still needed help. Just then, David approached her again and asked for her assistance. With her thoughts spinning, Anisha had no time to decide. She simply followed the convoy to the next destination. Meanwhile, the children continued their journey on foot until they spotted an abandoned truck on the roadside filled with food. Starving and exhausted, they felt like they had just been saved. Only Casper seemed concerned, wondering where the driver was. Jamila suggested he had probably been sent to drive for Jesus. But Casper then noticed a deep scratch on the driver's seat, as if made by claws, and saw a strange black substance writhing inside it. Even more disturbingly, it moved in sync with his hand when he waved it near. He didn't tell the others, instead asking the classmate who knew how to fix electronics to help repair the truck's radio. Before long, a transmission came through, a government alert warning of coordinated terror attacks worldwide, instructing civilians to stay indoors. Then the signal abruptly cut out, replaced by an eerie sound wave. The noise was so piercing that the kids immediately covered their ears, everyone except Casper. Though he didn't feel pain, his hands were trembling violently. He fought hard to keep himself under control. Once the signal stopped, Monty grabbed the radio and threw it away, blaming the entire crisis on the adults. He walked off alone. That's when Casper realized everything Monty had said before was true. He followed him and started a conversation. Monty, surprisingly, opened up. He revealed that his home life was a mess. His rich father had countless affairs, and his heartbroken mother had become addicted to drugs. That was why Monty refused to go back home. Just then, Jamila interrupted them, and the group decided to move on. But not everyone joined them. Some believed it was safer to stay with the food and wait for rescue. Casper didn't argue. He simply led Monty and the others on the journey home. Back in the desert, Trevathan finally returned to his base after a long, grueling trek, only to find it completely deserted. His team was gone, and the communication system was dead. With no other option, he sent a message to U.S. headquarters requesting a helicopter extraction, but there was no response. On a desk, he found a note stating that an unidentified life form had been discovered and the entire unit had been ordered to evacuate. The message shattered his last shred of hope. After burying his fallen comrades, he sat alone through the night. Afterwards, he finally managed to get a signal and contacted his wife. Through her, he learned the truth. There had been coordinated attacks around the globe, and it was now all over the news. Holding up the phone, his wife let him hear the news broadcast herself. The U.S. president had just delivered a national address declaring that the strange events happening worldwide were most likely due to an alien invasion. The revelation strengthened Trevathan's resolve. He had to get back to New York and reunite with his wife. Though the president had spoken out, many still didn't believe the alien theory. Some insisted it was an act of war by another country. But when Anisha heard the announcement, her instincts kicked in. She immediately ordered the driver to turn around. She had to reunite with her children. On the way back, they passed a horrifying scene. A military vehicle had been attacked by an unknown force and lay wrecked on the roadside, its soldiers dead where they fell. Anisha's panic only grew. She jumped into another military vehicle and tried to drive away, but the engine sputtered and refused to start. With no other choice, she grabbed a weapon for protection and set off on foot. After a long trek, she finally made it back to the cabin by nightfall, only to find the man of the house, his wife, and their children all gone. Fearing the worst, Anisha collapsed to the floor in tears. Just then, a strange, terrifying noise echoed through the house. Heart pounding, she rushed upstairs and hid inside a storage room. But the rumbling didn't stop, it only intensified. As Anisha's fear reached a breaking point, the ceiling above her suddenly opened. It turned out the man had been hiding in the attic, along with the children. Overwhelmed with relief, Anisha broke down in joyful tears. Once everyone calmed down, the woman of the house insisted that aliens were after them, that the end of the world had come. She sat on the floor, shaking uncontrollably, convinced that Anisha's arrival had brought disaster upon them. Her emotions spiraled out of control, her voice rising. Sensing things were getting dangerous, Anisha decided it was best to leave, but the man stopped her, afraid that any movement or noise might draw the aliens toward them. Tensions escalated into an argument. In the chaos, Anisha lost sight of her daughter, who suddenly slipped and fell from the attic. Anisha rushed to hush her, but it was too late. The little girl started crying. The aliens heard the noise and began closing in. Anisha quickly hid behind the door with her daughter, while the man stood ready with a weapon. The noise grew louder, closer. Then, in a moment of panic, the woman stepped on a rotten wooden plank. Her foot got stuck in the floor, and the alien struck. Seizing the chance, Manny scooped up his son and ran. Anisha grabbed her daughter and ducked into the bathroom on the first floor. Once things quieted down a bit, she cautiously opened the door and saw Manny and Luke crouched on the second floor. She urged them to come down quickly. Manny, however, insisted they should escape the house entirely. It was their best shot. The couple argued briefly, but in the end, Luke chose to stay with his mother. Manny moved a cabinet out of the way and tried to open the front door, but just then, an alien attacked. Anisha saw it happen. While the creature was distracted, she grabbed a pistol from the floor, took the two kids, and escaped through a window. She barely made it to the car and tried to start it, just as the man emerged from the house, weapon in hand. He tossed her the keys, urging her to take the children and go. He would stay behind and fight, determined to avenge his wife. But he didn't stand a chance. The alien killed him instantly. In a panic, Anisha hit the gas too hard and drove straight into a patch of mud. The car was stuck. The alien, attracted by the sound of the car radio, charged toward them. Just as its massive jaws opened to strike, Anisha frantically reached into Luke's backpack and pulled out the mysterious black stone. In a desperate move, she aimed it at the creature, and, to everyone's surprise, it worked. The alien was destroyed. It took Anisha a long time to calm down. Even more miraculously, Manny had survived the alien's earlier attack. Anisha rushed over to help him into the car and they sped away. But midway through the drive, she realized something was wrong. Manny wasn't breathing. She pulled over and administered emergency aid. Finally, his chest rose and fell again. He was alive. Deeply moved, Manny was filled with gratitude. They resumed their journey and eventually arrived at a small restaurant. It was well stocked with food, so Anisha decided to cook something to help the kids regain their strength. After everything he'd been through, Manny finally realized how much Anisha meant to him. He wanted to make amends, but Anisha still couldn't bring herself to fully let go of the past. Elsewhere, Trevathan was driving in search of his squad's evacuation base. On the way, he passed through a deserted village and encountered several refugees. Thankfully, one of them spoke English. During their conversation, Trevathan learned that his base had fallen during a fierce battle and everyone was dead. Even the place he was headed to had been reduced to ruins. Hearing that Trevathan was looking for a plane, one of the villagers told him Kabul was now the only place with aircraft. The group decided to travel there together. After a long, grueling journey, they finally reached the airport. Just as they arrived, another vehicle pulled up, and the people inside stormed past them without a word. Realizing time was of the essence, Trevathan made a run for it. Using his U.S. military credentials, he managed to board the plane. But the villagers weren't as lucky. They had to pay to get on. Unwilling to abandon them, Trevathan gave his weapons to the Kabul soldiers in exchange for the villagers' boarding passes. Meanwhile, Casper and his group arrived at a village, but it was completely deserted. Even the phone booths by the roadside were dead and couldn't connect. Just then, a car sped toward them without any sign of stopping. Seeing this, Casper stepped forward and stood firmly in front of the vehicle, forcing it to halt with his presence. The woman driving the car wasn't eager to help at first. She had just come from London, which had already fallen completely. She told Casper and the others about the alien invasion. Despite this, Casper insisted on returning home to find their parents. In the end, the woman agreed to help, and together they took the children back toward the city. The group said their goodbyes and headed home. Jamila, however, suspected Casper had some connection to the aliens and decided to follow him. On the way, they ran into a terrifying alien creature. Fortunately, 2 children managed to hide just in time and avoided being spotted. Once the creature moved on, the kids grabbed each other's hands and dashed toward home. Over in Tokyo, Yamato arrived at a monitoring station with her colleagues and Hinata's father. Using the director's name, she secured herself a new identity. After passing the checkpoint, she declared herself in charge of all operations at the station. She immediately began reviewing earlier recordings. No matter how they analyzed the sounds, the scientists insisted the noises were just satellite interference. But Yamato wasn't convinced. She ordered them to broadcast the sounds out loud. Listening carefully, she theorized that the countless overlapping noises might all come from a single source, a hive mind controlled by the aliens. Their goal was to locate a distress signal sent out by a spaceship within the hive. The team worked through the night, but no breakthroughs came. Most believed the signal had vanished. Still unconvinced, Yamato investigated further and discovered a distinct abnormal wave. When they played it back, it was indeed a distress signal from a spacecraft. Before the recording could finish, however, a group of airport staff stormed in and forcibly removed Yamato. Everyone else was kicked out of the lab, and just as hope was about to rise, it slipped away again. Back with Anisha, after a hearty meal with her family, she drove them to the safe zone the military had been heading for. There, she met Dr. David and told him about Manny's injuries, asking for help in treating him. Thanks to Anisha's medical background, the soldiers arranged a separate room for her and the kids to rest. Sitting down on the floor with the children, she finally felt some peace. Meanwhile, Trevathan wasn't so lucky. After a grueling flight, he arrived in London, but the military there refused to transport him to New York. With the city's transportation grid completely paralyzed, the few remaining planes were reserved for cargo and emergency supplies. They wouldn't risk flying anyone to the U.S. No matter how much Trevathan pleaded, the officers stood firm. Seeing his desperation, they told him to find his own way home and released him from custody. Realizing he was on his own, Trevathan left the airbase. But what he found on the streets shocked him. The city was a ruin, completely empty. His path was blocked by debris. With no other option, he tried to make his way on foot. Climbing a hill, he looked down over the devastated city. The bleak scene sent a wave of panic through him. At that moment, a phone booth caught his eye. After several attempts, he finally managed to call his wife, only to hear her recorded message. She spoke of missing him and worrying about his safety. Hearing her voice stirred deep guilt inside Trevathan, leaving him unsure where to turn. To drown his frustration, he entered an empty bar and drank alone. That's when Casper and Jamila appeared, seeking help. It turned out that when Casper and Jamila returned home, they were faced with the worst nightmare imaginable. Casper's mother had already been lost in the disaster, and the room was covered in a mysterious black substance, the same residue left behind by the aliens they'd encountered on the road. It was clear everything was the work of the extraterrestrials. Casper held Jamila tightly and opened up to her, revealing his background and confessing that he could receive alien signals. He explained his epilepsy was triggered by these signals. Determined to control his seizures, he wanted to use this ability to help humanity. With that, the 2 kids set out again, heading for the hospital. Along the way, they stumbled into a fierce battle between soldiers and aliens, which forced them to take refuge in a bar, where they met Trevathan. Casper shared his secret about receiving alien signals, but Trevathan was skeptical, finding it hard to believe such an unbelievable story. Sensing this, Jamila handed Trevathan Casper's sketchbook. At a glance, Trevathan immediately recognized a drawing of the alien creature he'd encountered in the Arabian desert just a few days ago. The realization hit him hard. This was serious. Without hesitation, he took the 2 children and rushed toward the hospital. The solution to defeating the aliens seemed within reach. Meanwhile, Anisha was experiencing strange things of her own. While sharing a meal with David, they talked about their families. Anisha learned David had divorced his wife, while she herself was deeply disappointed by her husband's infidelity. That vulnerability drew her toward David. Soon after, David led Anisha to a medical supply warehouse, where the 2 shared a passionate but smelly kiss. But when they returned to the room, Anisha discovered Manny and the children were nowhere to be found. It turned out the daughter had told Manny she missed her mother, so he'd taken her to look for Anisha. However, Manny overheard from staff that Anisha was with David, which set off alarm bells in his mind. Luke, unable to stay put, wandered around the base and came across a boy who claimed to know how the aliens attacked humans and led Luke to the morgue. When Anisha found Luke, he was surrounded by the boy's family. The mysterious black stone in Luke's hand began resonating strangely with the black substance on the soldiers' bodies. At the same time, Yamato, who had been captured, pleaded with the guarding soldiers to let her sexy body go, but they refused. Just as she was running out of options, the director suddenly burst in. After collaborating with the US, they had pinpointed the aliens' fixed location, geosynchronous orbit around Earth. Now, they needed Yamato's help to communicate with the extraterrestrials. Yamato set a condition. She wanted to lead the communications team. The director, with no choice, lied and claimed that Yamato had installed a lockdown program on the system. If they handled it, it would take 6 hours to unlock. Hearing this, the US commander immediately agreed to Yamato's demand. Back in the lab, Yamato sprang into action and quickly picked up alien signals, but no one present could decode the alien language. Not even the linguists could make sense of it. Yamato worked feverishly, trying to develop software to translate the signals using existing technology, yet current networks and systems simply couldn't crack the code. Frustrated, Yamato turned to another approach. Since the aliens had encountered Hinata, she decided to use him as a breakthrough point. She sent thousands of videos and photos of Hinata to the aliens. Everyone thought the idea was childish, even laughable, but surprisingly, it drew a response from the extraterrestrials. Suddenly, the quiet lab was filled with a repeating sound. The word Wajo echoed over and over, and it was unmistakably Hinata's voice. Yamato was ecstatic, her mind drifting back to when she and Hinata first met. Back then, Hinata had compared the newly acquainted Yamato to space, her sweet words capturing her heart and bringing them together. Incredibly, Hinata, dressed in a spacesuit, awoke in the depths of space, roused by the very sound playing from the spaceship's speakers. She couldn't help but whisper the word Wajo, which means castle. Yamato rushed to the communications room and tried to reach Hinata, urgently calling for help and pleading with Earth not to attack. But the American soldiers on the other end suspected it wasn't really Yamato. They thought the aliens were impersonating her voice to deceive them. And since the transmission revealed Yamato's location, the soldiers quickly decided to launch a nuclear strike. However, they gave her 1 hour. If she couldn't get the enemy to stop the communication by then, the final attack would proceed. Other scientists agreed with the soldiers. They analyzed Hinata's audio and found the voice was synthesized. Even Hinata's own father was convinced, so they cut off the communications. Angry and desperate, Yamato confronted them, demanding to know why they acted this way. They told her that the voice wasn't truly Hinata's. Still, Yamato believed this was a valuable chance to negotiate with the aliens and refused to give up. Suddenly, she noticed the American soldiers had vanished. Learning they were preparing a nuclear attack, her anxiety skyrocketed. She believed it really was Hinata on the line. Maybe they could get critical enemy intel. The key was proving the voice's authenticity. Yamato had a plan. She reconnected with Hinata and asked if she remembered their first meeting. Hinata didn't speak, but instead played a song by her favorite singer. That was enough for Yamato to believe it was truly her. Just then, the communication cut off again, this time ordered by a US general. Yamato stormed into his office demanding answers, but the general coldly dismissed her efforts. He insisted, for the safety of Earth, they must launch the nuclear strike against the aliens, no matter what. Meanwhile, Trevathan arrived at the city hospital with the 2 children. Jamila couldn't find her doctor mother, so she took it upon herself to broadcast a blue alert. The sound attracted a neurologist who thought it was just children playing pranks and tried to have them removed, but Trevathan stopped her. He pleaded for her to believe their story and attempt to trigger Casper's epilepsy. Seeing the sincerity in his eyes, the doctor led them to the MRI room. To help Casper relax, Trevathan shared his own story. He and his wife had a child born with an incurable disease who died young. Unable to cope, Trevathan went to war, which ultimately strained his marriage. Once the MRI machine started, Casper's body began convulsing. Strange images appeared in his mind, and he muttered the words Wajo and son. The doctor's scans revealed billions of neurons firing in perfect sync, a pattern unlike any human brain. Trevathan realized Casper might be seeing what the aliens saw. As Casper's neurons fired, they somehow attracted a horde of aliens toward the hospital. When Casper recovered, he warned Trevathan. Together, they found Jamila and, relying on Casper's abilities, hid in the stairwell, dodging the alien attackers. Through the glass, they witnessed the destruction outside. Casper's powers revealed the aliens were there to kill him. To protect Casper, Trevathan locked the children in a room and faced the aliens alone. But his handgun was useless. Only when Casper's epilepsy flared again did he invade the aliens' minds and stop their assault. Elsewhere, Anisha and her family received high-priority military protection. Their black stones were the key weapons against the aliens. To keep them safe, a squad was assigned to escort them to the Pentagon. But the black stones soon attracted unwanted attention. On the road, armed assailants ambushed them, flipping their vehicle. During the ensuing firefight, the family fled into the nearby woods. Unfortunately, a traitor within the military had leaked their location, and the attackers quickly pursued them into the forest. To protect Anisha and the kids, Manny, struck by a surge of conscience, decided to draw the enemy's attention onto himself. He told Anisha to get the children to safety while he distracted a pursuing soldier by talking nonsense. But the soldier quickly caught on, weapon raised, demanding Manny tell the truth. Seeing no hope left, Manny shouted for Anisha and the kids to run for their shitty lives, then sacrificed himself under the soldier's gunfire. Meanwhile, Anisha and the children stumbled into an area filled with that strange black substance. Thankfully, with the help of the black stone they carried, they managed to get through safely. At that moment, brilliant white lights appeared across the skies worldwide, nuclear weapons launched by the US. The attack took effect immediately. Aliens everywhere suddenly died, and Casper in the hospital collapsed, unconscious no matter how much they called his name. It seemed the war between aliens and humans had come to an abrupt end. News of victory spread worldwide, with people cheering in celebration. Yet Casper appeared to be the sole casualty. Medical examinations revealed massive brain cell death. He was reduced to a vegetative state, sustained only by a respirator. Seeing this, Trevathan's old wounds reopened, and he chose to shut down emotionally. When Jamila confronted him, he insisted it was the nuclear strike, not Casper's abilities, that defeated the aliens. He blamed Casper's epilepsy and said he couldn't save him. He told Jamila to go find her mother. Jamila handed Trevathan Casper's sketchbook, urging him not to forget Casper. Later on the streets, Trevathan witnessed crowds celebrating and beating alien corpses, but he felt no joy. At a phone booth, he called U.S. military headquarters, requesting transport to New York. The next day, the British military received him. They wanted to question how he survived in Arabia and whether he knew the aliens' true purpose, if they planned to conquer Earth. Trevathan refused to say more, saying they already knew the answer, so there was no point asking him. The military officer decided to stop questioning and arranged transportation for Trevathan to return to New York. After a long flight, Trevathan finally reached home. His anxious heart searched the house but found no sign of his wife, until she returned shortly after. The long-separated couple embraced tightly, sharing their longing. Trevathan realized the importance of family and resolved to leave the military and find a job so he could stay close to his wife. Just as things seemed to be turning around for Trevathan, Casper was declared dead. Without his parents and suffering massive brain damage after a final farewell from Jamila, medical staff removed his oxygen mask. Meanwhile, Jamila found her own mother in the hospital and was happily reunited with her family. Elsewhere, Anisha and the children successfully evaded their pursuers in the forest. Feeling momentarily safe, she told the kids about Manny's sacrifice. There was no use dwelling on the sadness now. Worried the armed forces might return, she led them deeper into the woods, where they found an abandoned house to rest. While there, Luke saw a news broadcast on TV and thought they should return home. But Anisha insisted they couldn't go back. They needed to survive here. A voice in her mind warned her not to trust the government. Her intuition told her the aliens might come back. Luke was upset. His mother had already abandoned his father, and now she wouldn't even let him return home. The next day, Anisha held a small funeral for Manny in the woods. Luke stood silently nearby, seeming to have grown up overnight. After Anisha and his sister returned inside, Luke went alone to the grave and tossed the black stone far away. Unexpectedly, green lights appeared in the sky. Remembering his mother's words, he hurriedly retrieved the black stone and saw the black substance on it writhing slowly, as if transmitting some mysterious signal. Meanwhile, Anisha was putting her daughter to bed when she sensed something. Suddenly, she sat up, her face filled with terror. Grieving the loss of her loved one, Yamato decided to heal her wounded heart by leaving her hometown with Hinata's belongings and exploring the outside world. She followed the compass's direction, but along the way, she encountered a laid-back monk who surprisingly smoked and drank, hardly fitting the image of a typical monk. He invited Yamato to his home for a chat. The monk explained that his master had starved to death in the temple for the sake of faith, while the other monks had all fled. Having come to his own realization, the monk chose to enjoy life instead. After hearing Yamato's story, he advised her to become a monk herself and let go of her past. Though Yamato didn't actually take his advice to become a monk, that night she burned Hinata's clothes, symbolically releasing her past and choosing to start anew. Meanwhile, deep in the Amazon jungle, a massive alien spaceship had crash-landed. The military dispatched large special forces teams to investigate the vessel. Inside, soldiers discovered a strange, flowing substance unlike anything they had ever seen. Elsewhere, Yamato spent the night at the monk's house. While checking her computer, she detected a series of abnormal signals from satellites accompanied by eerie sound waves. She stepped outside and gazed into the distance. Clearly, the strange events were far from over. Meanwhile, Casper, who was thought dead, miraculously awakened in the morgue. Rising, he pushed open the morgue door and was shocked to see Yamato's father waiting for him. The father handed Casper a red box containing a compass. He told Casper that with this compass, he would know where he was and where he needed to go. Following the compass's direction, Casper found himself inside the alien spaceship. At the same time, Trevathan and his wife enjoyed a peaceful vacation by the sea. Trevathan pulled out Casper's sketchbook and noticed a page filled with Chinese characters. After translating, he found the word meant star. He didn't understand the significance. Called away by his wife, the two stood by the shore looking out over the horizon. Suddenly, an enormous alien base appeared in the sky above them, leaving them utterly stunned. With that, the film came to an end. Season 1 essentially serves as a setup for the second season. The story unfolds across 4 regions and 4 narrative threads, depicting events leading up to the alien invasion. Yet the aliens haven't truly invaded Earth, only sending a few creatures and broadcasting strange signals that throw the planet into despair. It's only at the end that the aliens finally show up in the human world. One can only imagine the terrifying devastation the real invasion in Season 2 will bring. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.